All right, so get yourself comfortable. It doesn't matter which position you're in. I think we're going to be doing some of this with eyes open and some with eyes closed. So to begin with, take a deep breath, and on the exhalation, just let out all of the tension in the body. Take another deep inhalation, and on this exhalation, let out all of the expectations for this meditation. Take one last deep inhalation, and on this exhalation, let go of any thoughts that you have had about the day and about what's to come. Just resolve to be absolutely present right here in this moment. One of the key things that we talk about with the seventh fetter is this ability to make something out of nothing, which is our, or Pernilla's, more down to earth way of saying form from formlessness. All throughout our day, we can't help but constantly create something from nothing. We might be doing it in terms of thought, making all sorts of stories out of simple assumptions or small sensations in the body, something that somebody says that gets blown up into whole dialogues and whole worlds of consequence that haven't actually happened outside of our imagination. And it can be things as simple as taking the space in front of us that initially presents itself as one unified form of color and separating that out into separate parts and deciding that just one of those parts is a form unto itself and that it has an entire meaning and a life story and a name and a purpose and all of that, when what we have found in the sixth fetter is that we can't even really tell where the boundary of something is. So what I would like you to do to start with is to open your eyes and find any object that your eyes may land on easily. And notice immediately, the second that your eyes have found it, that you already seem to know what this thing is. There's already an entire world created around this object. So while holding your gaze on it, I'd like you to take a minute to allow your vision to go more to the periphery. Instead of feeling like you are focusing directly on this object, widen the gaze out to the sides and start to take in not just that object, but all of the space around it. See if you can start to consider this object as part of the environment in which it is existing. You can't define this object as having boundaries without defining the wall that you might see behind it or the other objects around it, without the light hitting it in such a way that it seems to create lines, distinctions, depth. So very gently allow your vision to blend so that this object starts to become more and more part of the entire visual field. Remember to relax as we do this. If you get tense and you feel like you're trying to make something happen, you're already defeating the process. The more calm and settled the mind is, the less apt it is to create these artificial distinctions. Notice as it starts to blend into the surrounding view, if what you initially took it to be starts to also dissolve with it. Can you really make a story out of this blur of color, out of these somewhat indefinable shapes? And if it has started to blend into the surrounding space, see if you can notice that the entire visual field is at this same plane where no particular shape or color is any more distinct than another. There is no separation outside of thought. You can feel that all of the visual field is becoming more and more just one abstract painting. Lots of indefinable blurs of shapes and colors. And just stay relaxed and allow it to maintain that sense of boundaryless abstraction. And then allow the eyes to move to another part of that abstract, flat painting, to whatever catches its attention. It might be because of the color, it might be because of another distinct shape that seems intriguing. But allow it to find that pattern, that place of color, and then be very, very aware as you put your attention on that spot of what happens as the brain starts to try to make sense of it. Be aware if it's trying to put a boundary around it to create a sense of this being separate from everything else. It can happen very, very quickly. Notice if you even feel sensations in the body that are like a grasping, like a feeling of needing to know what this is, needing to get a handle on it. Like there's almost an anxiety in ambiguity. and see if for a moment you're able to just keep it in that open, undefined, spacious, blurry color. If not, it's okay. Try to blur it back out again by paying more attention to the surrounding space. Right now, we're just trying to get a feel for what it feels like to need to grasp, to define something, to make it into something. So if you can go back to this flat, spacious, undefined image, again, allow the eyes to land on this or another patch of color. And just watch as that patch of color starts to take shape again. It starts to create a form. And notice as this is happening, how long it takes before you not only can see what it is, but that you also know the name of it. Does it have an immediate label that pops up alongside this seeming definition of it standing out against the background? Do you feel that tension in the body suddenly resolve once it has a name? And as soon as an object has a name, do you also recognize that you know what it's for? You know what you can do with it. This object has a purpose. It might not yet have a backstory, but you know what to do with it if you wanted to. And very quickly, most times when we know what an object is, we give it a name, we know its purpose, it will also come with some sort of a backstory. It's a backstory about where you got this item from, who gave it to you, where you purchased it, any memories that came up associated with that. Notice that any of those memories are not actually here right now in this room. Just like the label itself, the name of this supposed object is not actually on the shape itself. The name, the label of it, is something that is appearing in the mind. You're perhaps hearing it, just like you are seeing in the mind memories of where this object originally came from, or at least how it first entered your life.
Thank you, buddy. Okay, honey.
So recognize all of the additional labels and thoughts that are associated with this particular object. And notice how quickly and effortlessly they have come online. And then notice if you even have feelings of judgment about that object, likes and dislikes, approval or disapproval, maybe questioning its location, deciding that it's actually quite dirty and needs to be dusted, or it's a plant that needs water. Notice any of those adjacent thoughts that come up alongside of it. None of this has any relation to the object itself. The object that was minutes ago just an indescribable, indefinable form. It was a formless color. It was a pattern of light. And now all of a sudden it has an entire identity to it. But that identity is not inherent to it. That identity, all of its meaning, its history, every bit of that, the label, the judgments about it, are all a product of your own creation. Nothing has any inherent self nature. You are imbuing everything that you encounter throughout the day with this artificial self nature. And you do the same thing with your own thoughts about you and your own sensations in the body that you take to be the hallmark of where you reside. The feeling of doership, of agency, of ownership, all of the feelings of a self, the me, the witness, the experiencer, the perceiver, all of that is making something out of nothing. All of that is giving a label and a backstory and in self nature to fleeting, changing moments of appearances. Thoughts arise and thoughts fade away. Bodily sensations arise and bodily sensations fade away. The two are not really connected, and the two do not in any way create a self. But in the same way that we make every colorful pattern that we see throughout the day into a discernible object, we take all of the energetic patterns that we encounter in our experience throughout the day and make those into some sort of a self. Notice, even if you were not able to follow what I was saying today, and you weren't able to dissolve this object into the background, and then maybe you were able to do that, but you weren't able to notice how quickly all of the labels and everything arose on top of it. If you feel any sort of judgment for yourself about not being good enough at inquiry, not being far enough along, not being good at meditating, or any other of those judgments, recognize that those thoughts are all creating something out of nothing. They're creating a meditator or a spiritual seeker, somebody who is going to gain something by doing a practice. And they're creating a benefit, an idea that there is something to be gained and that something will improve if you just see this thing. And it's creating all of these judgments. Like, it's better to be able to follow an inquiry than it is to just fall asleep during it. But that's just a judgment based on nothing. Nothing has an inherent self nature or an inherent goodness or badness. Everything we think we are seeing, everything we think a certain object is, the nature that we decide about it the judgments that we lay on it, the attributes we impose upon it, all of those are nothing but our creation. And if you let that go, if you truly have a moment of experiencing the world without creating that form out of the formless, without creating that something out of nothing, then you can't talk about it. There's no way to conceptualize any of it. It is simply a silent, empty spaciousness. It doesn't need to be made into something else. When you are fully open and fully unidentified, and you are likewise not identifying into anything around you, there is nothing that can be said about any of it. There's nothing that can be known or grasped about any of it. But you can be aware that you might feel sensations in the body that are a little bit anxious about that. And that's okay. Just feel them. Recognize that they too have no quality of their own. A sensation that we attribute as an anxiety sensation does not have any inherent anxiety to it, nor does it have a positive or negative attribute to it. It's neither better nor worse to feel this sensation in the body. It's not something we need to get rid of if you just recognize that it is just sensation with absolutely nothing added to it. And from that place, there is nowhere to go. And there is nothing that needs to be done because everything is perfectly appearing as it appears. It's almost ludicrous to think that it needs to be different than it is, or that it could be different than it is. Because all of those needs and ideas are just our projections. If we stop projecting, they all dissolve immediately. So through the rest of this meeting and through the rest of the day, see if you can be aware of the patterns of the mind racing in, trying to make something where there originally was nothing. When you tell a story about your past, or you hear somebody else telling a story, recognize that it only has a limited relative truth. Recognize what is coming up in the emotions and in the sensations, and see if you can feel the non-inherent nature of them. If you can feel that there is no inherent okayness or not okayness, goodness, badness, rightness, wrongness, all of those are a judgment that is arising in the moment, and it does not touch the actual experience. See if you can notice those movements of mind, and then take a breath and try to release them. Try to come back to a moment of silence where you are not imposing anything upon experience. Simply arises and simply passes away. Thank you very much.